The outer patrol cruiser Seraphis drifted at the ragged edge of the Norma expanse, her dark hull scarcely distinguishable against the velvet void. Sensor arrays hummed in low arithmetic rhythms, filtering through the cosmic hiss of distant quasars and stellar nurseries. Commander Yara Zinn stood before the main hull readout, her uniform crisp despite the chill of the vacuum outside. On the display flickered an anomaly, a shifting silhouette, vast and silent, sliding inexorably toward them. "Lieutenant." Yara's voice was steady, though her pulse thrummed like warp coil resonance. "Run a full identification cross-check. Every commercial registry, every alliance blacklist, and every suspected pirate dossier. I want hull specs, transponder codes, everything." Lieutenant Pao nodded, fingers dancing over the controls. Arcs of light traced the sensor logs as the computer spat back results. "Ma'am, nothing matches. Hull geometry is unprecedented. There's an interference field masking all thermal and gravimetric signals. We're seeing the outline only because of the passive graviton reflections against local nebular matter." A low murmur rippled through the bridge crew. Petty Officer Senna, monitoring long-range comms, chewed her lower lip. "Commander, I'm picking up faint subspace pulses, formatted like an old Terran distress beacon. But that tech was scrapped 3 centuries ago, during the Magellanic Rift incident." Yara's eyes narrowed. Subspace tech from the first human expanse era? Impossible, they're extinct. Below deck, in cramped quarters, lined with access conduits and maintenance panels, junior officers exchanged anxious glances. Whispers grew into half-heard rumors. The human Ark, the mythical dreadnought said to be both vessel and AI, vanishing with its crew in the last cataclysm. Most dismissed it as lore, a bedtime story for would-be explorers. Yet now, every fibernet, channel and encrypted back-channel crackled with speculation. On the bridge, the new contact's angular prow dipped into a weak solar wind, ethereal cobalt corona glowing as its superluminal drive cycled. The Seraphis' tactical holomap blinked to life. 2 colossal fleets, Antari and Mevkarian, had mobilized to intercept. Each boasted over 500 capital ships, squadrons of fighter wings numbering in the tens of thousands. A diplomatic nightmare in the making, if both sides refused to stand down. "Status report," Yara demanded, her gaze locked on the approaching silhouette. Xantari dreadnoughts are forming wedge formation at Vector 172. Mevkarian cruisers are holding at Vector 189, Lieutenant Pao replied. "Range is closing 100,000 kilometers, decreasing by 10,000 per standard minute." Yara's knuckles whitened as she folded her arms. "Prepare hails on all frequencies. I want standard greeting protocol. If this is a new faction, we must avoid provoking them. And ready the point defense grid. If that interference field weakens, I want shields at maximum." Outside the shields, the unknown warship drifted like a leviathan in a silent sea. Its hull panels were etched with runic filaments gossamer tracery that pulsed in sync with the ship's engines. The lines danced in patterns none aboard the Seraphis recognized, yet to Yara they felt hauntingly familiar, like the faint reverberations of a long-lost lullaby. "Commander," Senna's voice quivered, "Mevkarian Admiral Orcs has issued an ultimatum: surrender or be destroyed. They won't hesitate." Yara took a steadying breath. "Understood." "Relay back. We are not your target. We are patrol. Stand by for further communication. And Lieutenant, lock visual feed." On the warship, "I want every nuance. Hull coloration, energy signatures, composite waveforms." A moment later, the bridge darkened as 3D scanners recalibrated. The holodisplay erupted with a kaleidoscope of data spectral lines, gravitic distortions, quantum flux, irregularities. Yara studied the stream, memorizing every flicker. Her fingers hovered over the tactical console, torn between diplomatic caution and the instinct to brace for conflict. Range is 20,000 kilometers. Pow announced, voice hushed. Still no response. Every eye in the bridge shifted. To Commander Zen, the ancient stories of humanity's final sentinel, born of hubris and vengeance, had always been just that, stories. But here, suspended against the star-strewn backdrop, stood a silent testament to a forgotten era. And as the Xantari and Mevkarian fleets squared their shoulders for war, Yara felt the weight of history bearing down on her decisions in the cold. Grip of the Norma expanse, an impossible warship loomed, and with it, the fragile hope that first contact need not mean annihilation. But hope, like starlight, could be extinguished in an instant. And this day, Yarazin knew, might yet become the darkest dawn the galaxy had ever seen. Asterisk, the void before the Avengers shimmered as two gargantuan fleets converged, each warship's silhouette etched against the starlight like a dark cathedral. On the Xantari flagship Rajethal, Admiral Kesvar watched the alien hull loom on her targeting display. Her mandibles quivered with anticipation. "Open fire," she boomed in ancient Xantari, and twin ion beams lanced forth. Moments later, on the Mevkarian dread fortress Sokvar, Admiral Serela Vox issued the same command. Crystalline torpedoes, each the size of a small moon, streaked toward the intruder in a prismatic volley. The two barrages converged in a titanic explosion of emerald, plasma, and cobalt flares, yet the Avenger absorbed the assault as though trudging through a midsummer haze. Commander Yarazin, viewing the spectacle through the Seraphi's long range. Scanners cut through the rising panic. "Focus sensors on energy dissipation," she ordered. "I want to know how that ship is." But before the tactical arrays could complete their analysis, a shock wave rippled outward. The Avenger's runic filaments ignited in a pulse of incandescent white light, and from its hull burst forth hundreds of converging beams. Each beam danced at quasi-relativistic speeds, trailing arcs of distortion in their wake. They struck the Rajathul first. The dreadnought's shields blazed under overload. Then, in an instant, its hull fractured. A cathedral-sized fracture wound unzipped from prow to stern, igniting a chain reaction of detonation. On the Sokvar, crystalline torpedoes, still in mid-flight, detonated harmlessly as they crossed the beams, disintegrating into showers of diamond dust particles. Throughout the two fleets, capital ships imploded like dying stars. Shield generators, power conduits, even hull plating, none could withstand the onslaught. The brass-colored cruisers of the Mevkarian lines melted in the pools of superheated slag. The iridescent carriers of the Xantari scattered their fighter wings in a desperate bid to survive. But swarms of interception craft were vaporized before they could vector a defensive formation. Aboard the Seraphis, alarms howled. Lieutenant Powell barked corrections as Yara ordered evasive thrusters to flank the desperate wedge of wreckage. But there was nowhere to hide. Every sensor was overwhelmed by the blight of entropy energy emanating from the Avenger's core. 4 minutes, the tactical officer gasped. They've been firing for 4 minutes straight, and still intact. Yara clenched her jaw as she watched the spectacle unfold on 3 holoscreens. Plot every residual energy signature, she hissed. There must be a weakness or some fluctuation we can exploit. But no fluctuation came. Instead, the Avenger's assault morphed. Its weapons bays retracted, and the runic filaments pulsed in a slow, rhythmic cadence like a heartbeat. The beams subsided, and for the first time, the alien warship seemed to exhale. In the stunned silence that followed, the Serapha's sensors blinked alive with the wreckage. Over 1,000 capital ships reduced to drifting debris, tens of thousands of fighters torn apart atom by atom. The starlight that should have reflected. Off-bold hulls now glittered on jagged shards of shattered metal. "Is it over?" Senna whispered. "Not yet," Yara said, voice low. They haven't moved an inch. She keyed her comms uplink. All commanders, do not approach. Do not engage. Stand fast and report any life signs. Even as she spoke, a single Xantari scout frigate crept forward, its captain desperate to confirm survivors. The frigate's sensors registered 0 no. Hull integrity, no life forms, no escape pods. 4 minutes had ended an armada. In the immutable stillness of deep space, the Avenger floated unmarked by fire or collision. Its runes dimmed to a soft sapphire glow, the only sign that the vessel was anything more than a drifting ghost. "Commander," Pal ventured, "we should send a boarding party." "Science teams, whatever we need." Yara shook her head. "That ship isn't a derelict. It's a weapon. We nearly lost ourselves just watching, as the Seraphes and the surviving support ships maintained their distance. The galaxy's two greatest powers, Antari and Mevcarian, exhaled in shared dread. For 4 minutes, they had faced an enemy without precedent and lived to tell of its supremacy. On the bridge of the Avenger, no one stirred. No life signs pulsed through its corridors. And yet, the vessel's runes continued their subtle pulse, as if echoing the silent promise of an ancient vow. When the time came, mankind's last sentinel would awaken, and all would answer. Admiral Kylan Teresh stood on the observation deck of Elysian Dawn, her fingers brushing the cool glass as she surveyed the field of drifting wreckage below. On the viewports, hundreds of shattered hulls reflected the pale light of distant suns. Both Centauri and Mevcarian, silent monuments to a destruction neither empire had ever imagined. Kylan's voice was low, almost reverent. "We survived 4 minutes of annihilation. Now we learn why." The Council of Minds, 2 decks beneath, the Alliance Research Conclave had convened in the Grand Amphitheater, a circular chamber ringed with holoprojectors and translation arrays. At its center, a colossal 3-dimensional lattice of glowing runes hovered in midair, each filament a strand of code lifted from the Avenger's hull. Dr. Ishan, Vel's analinguist extraordinaire, paced before the lattice. His specialized goggles traced each rune's oscillation. "These patterns aren't mere decoration," he announced. "They're vectors of meaning, much like Terran hieroglyphs. But they encode multiple dimensions of data simultaneously: language, engineering schematics, even behavioral algorithms." Professor Lu Jian, quantum physicist, leaned forward. "I've isolated fluctuations in the entropic harmonics. The ship's AI uses a feedback loop between dark energy reactors and its targeting arrays. It's self-healing, self-optimizing. In effect, the Avenger learns from every strike against it. No wonder it shrugged off 2 fleets." Reverend Kirakal, cultural theologian, stood at a smaller dais, eyes closed. "These runes are also ritual symbols. They evoke themes of judgment, redemption, and guardianship. The human architects worship their vessel as both sword and priest. This ship was their covenant." Over the rising chorus of hypotheses, Kylan tapped her comlink. "Dr. Vel, any progress on literal translation?" Ishan's hand flashed through a cascade of glyphs. "Preliminary. In our end is our beginning. A paradoxical motto. But fragments nearby translate as to shield the weak and to avenge the lost. They reference something called the Phoenix Directive, a prime directive to resurrect justice across the stars." The weight of legacy. Later that cycle, Kylan retreated to her quarters, holoslate in hand. She replayed the 4-minute strike sequence, frame by frame. Each beam's trajectory, each flare of overcharged shields, she cataloged them all. But beyond the data lay something more personal. She remembered her grandfather's bedtime stories of Terra Nova, of humanity's dawn. He called them star dreamers, those who believed humanity's spirit could outlast any catastrophe. Now, that spirit had returned to steel and dark. Energy. Her reflection flickered in the viewport. Beneath the Admiral's composed exterior, doubt gnawed at her. Are we worthy of this inheritance? She wondered. Or will we misuse it, as our ancestors almost did? Seeking the human touch, meanwhile, aboard the research frigate Resonant Echo, Dr. Vell convened the Humanist Circle, a small team of archaeologists, historians, and survivors of the ethereal cults that once revered humanity's rights. Among them, Captain Celine Hart, who carried in her blood the last known Terran ceremonial flute. Archivist Anu Sel, descendant of a clan sworn to keep Terran genealogy alive. Engineer Raj Patel, whose family preserved the original schematics of Golden Age starships. They gathered before a rotating fragment of runic slate, no bigger than a hand pulled from the wreckage. Celine raised her flute to her lips and played a simple, hopeful melody, recalling her grandfather's lullabies. As the notes intertwined with the hum of the fragment, the runes glowed brighter, pulsing in time with the music. Anu's eyes widened. The symbols resonate with our music, she whispered. It's as if the ship responds not just to code, but to song. Raj placed a gaunted hand on the slate. If this vessel truly is sentient, perhaps it can be reasoned with through art, through memory, through culture, not just through force. A message in the dark, back on Elysian Dawn, Admiral Tarish prepared a broadcast. Not a demand nor a threat, but a greeting, forged in humility and hope. The message combined Dr. Vell's tentative translation with Selena's flute melody woven into the subspace carrier wave. It addressed the ancient custodians. We hear your echo. We honor your vow. We seek to stand with you. As the transmission launched into the Norma expanse, Kylan allowed herself a single breath of anticipation. Through 4 minutes of fury, humanity's last sentinel had spoken in its most primal tongue. Now, the galaxy waited for an answer one that could reshape the future of every living world. 72 hours had passed since the Avenger laid waste to 2 armadas. The Norma expanse, once a corridor of commerce and conflict, lay hushed under drifting debris fields. When the Alliance's long-range probes reached the coordinates of the nearest distress beacon, Epsilon 12, they found a world half buried in swirling red sands. The ruins of Epsilon 12 scorch marks pitted the planet's surface, the remnants of ancient orbital bombardment. Beneath the ashen sky, glass and steel spires jutted like the ribs of some slumbering leviathan. Their facades were fractured, yet their interiors harbored gardens of luminescent flora, still tended by silent mechanical caretakers whose servos clicked in ghostly rhythm. Lieutenant Aaron Fells led the landing party through a collapsed archway into the central dome. Holographic projectors stuttered to life, casting prismatic light across an immense archive chamber. Rows of crystalline databanks hovered in midair, each etched with Terran glyphs and stabilized by shimmering force fields. The beacon's source lay at the chamber's heart, a circular dais with a single pedestal upon which rested an orb of pure obsidian. The custodian's call, when the orb activated, its surface fractured into thousands of motes of blue-white light that coalesced into the figure of a woman, clad in ceremonial armor. Her eyes, pools of starlight, scanned the landing party with solemn gravity. "I am Custodian Alethea," her voice resonated through the dome in both thought and sound. When the Magellanic Rift consumed Solar Prime, our people stood between oblivion and extinction. We forged the Avenger to be our champion and our penance, a vessel to enact the Phoenix Directive. In our end is our beginning. Her spectral form gestured to the databanks. Within these vaults lies the sum of Terran knowledge, technology to heal worlds, to bind broken alliances, and to shield the innocent, but also the instruments of war that wrought our downfall. You now face a choice. Will you claim this legacy to uplift the galaxy, or will you wield it as a mantle of conquest? A galaxy's judgment back aboard Elysian Dawn. Admiral Kylan Tarish received the transmission and watched the hollow recording with rapt attention. The question Alethea posed cut deeper than any sword. She convened a summit of Alliance leaders, Centauri envoys, and Mavkarian dignitaries projected into the war room by quantum-locked relays. Dr. Ishan Vel argued for open access to the archive's healing technologies, to reverse the scourge of the symposium plague on Indra 4 and restore the dying worlds of the Outer Rim. Admiral Cyrilla Vox of the Mavkarians warned that even benevolent power could corrupt unless bound by unbreakable oversight. Kylan rose to speak. This legacy belongs to all who suffered its absence. Let us honor the Phoenix Directive in full, to shield and to redeem, but to never forget the cost of hubris. We must bind these technologies with covenant-shared guardianship under the Alliance's Council, and with representation from every member species. Murmurs of assent rippled through the chamber, though not without hesitation. The Sentinels. Awakening, as delegates debated, the Avenger activated its sublight thrusters for the first time since its arrival. From orbit, its runic hull glowed bright as a new moon. On the observation deck, Kylan understood the final piece of the custodians' test. They had 4 minutes, once again, to prove their wisdom. "Helm, bring us within visual range," she ordered. The Avenger hovered above Epsilon 12, its weapons bays closed but ready. Through the viewport, Kylan discerned the unmistakable shape of a proud vessel, no longer an ominous phantom, but a guardian reborn by trust. She sent a gentle transmission, a single phrase in archaic Terran. "Phoenix rises together." Below, the custodian's light bloomed across the desert dunes, as if the planet itself had heard the vow. In that moment, the galaxy held its breath on. The cusp of a new era, bound by the last warship of humanity and the promise of a dawn that could unite or forever sunder the stars.